Welcome back to Normal But Not. I'm Krystal Centinello, a trauma-informed boundaries, confidence, and empowerment coach. My mission is to help people pleasers and those recovering from toxic relationships reclaim their power, set healthy boundaries, and live authentically. In this podcast, we break down all the stuff we think is normal, but actually might not be, so we can build a life that feels balanced, fulfilling, and true to who we are. Today, we're diving into one of the deepest fears that many of us carry, often without even realizing it: the fear of being abandoned or disliked. For a long time, I stayed in an emotionally abusive relationship because of this exact fear. I was terrified of what would happen if I left. I questioned whether anyone would actually ever love me. I thought maybe people would judge me if I left the relationship and that it would somehow have been my fault. It was one of those things that looked perfectly normal on the outside. The relationship just looked picture perfect. In fact, due to social media, everything looked as though everything was amazing. But underneath, there were a lot of things that were not normal about the relationship, including the fact that my ex-partner had me convinced that I was completely unlovable and I was lucky enough to have him. Although he never used the words that I was unlovable, he would tell me all the time that he loved me, but the tone of voice or the gaslighting and other things that were said to me made me feel as though I would be abandoned at any moment, and if I would, no one else would possibly want me. And it left me feeling trapped and broken. The fear was so powerful that I thought staying, even if it hurt, was better than facing the unknown of being alone. So today we're going to unpack where these fears come from, how they shape us, and we're going to look at these attachment styles that form in childhood and how they can deeply impact our adult relationships, and most importantly, what we can do to let go of these fears and build healthier, more secure connections. So why do so many of us grow up with this fear of being abandoned and disliked? Now, before we even get into it, I'm going to start with possibly being disliked and possibly not being perfect in my podcast. I'm recording right now on probably one of the busiest times of night. There are cars zooming down my street. But as we talked about a few episodes ago, I'm not going to face burnout again. So I have to record on a time that works for me and not when everything sounds perfect. I have to make sure that I'm reserving hours or moments for self-care. So even though I do a million things all of the time, that I don't run into burnout. So you might hear cats meowing, you might hear horns, a whole bunch of things. I'm warning you ahead of time. You might dislike part of this, but I'm not getting back into burnout, and I'm facing my fear of abandonment and being disliked. So getting back to where this comes from, a lot of it goes back to our childhood experiences. If we had parents or caregivers who were emotionally distant or inconsistent, some who may have been like tense, or if we had from the last episode, alcoholic parents, whether they were functional, fun, or dysfunctional, there may have been this tension that existed. Or we had like a narcissistic parent who also had this conditional love that we learned that we were only loved if we met certain conditions. And we felt that we had to earn love through our actions, our performances. We might have started to believe that love and approval were conditional. With that, and before I get into the attachment theory and attachment styles, I want to add, in the light of an election that came. Some of us as children may have been so afraid of being unloved or disliked that when we grew into adulthood, we didn't want to go against what our parents' thoughts were when it came to politics and things until this very day. Either side with them because we're afraid that they won't like us, or we don't tell them to their face how we feel about politics, because we're afraid that they will disown us. Or, I mean, I hope it's not that extreme, but it could be. So it really are these things that we use to adapt as children and to make sure that we survived and we fit in and we had a sense of belonging, have become maladaptive, and they don't allow us to be our authentic selves as adult. And so we're still living with a mask to perform and please everyone else around us. Pleasing everyone else and not knowing who we are or performing for other people is not a normal way of living. Or, you know what? I keep saying it's not normal, but it's become so normalized for you that it feels normal, but it's not. It's not healthy. When I say normal, I mean healthy. It is the reason that's brought you to this podcast in the first place. You have sensed something is off. So let's get back to attachment styles. So attachment styles and attachment theory tells us that the way we connected or didn't connect with our caregivers as children influences our relationships as adults. So there are 4 main attachment styles, and there can be combinations of these, but I'm going to talk about the 4 main ones right now. The secure attachment style, or what we call as normal, although we don't see this pictured probably as often as we would like to, or we may not have had examples of secure attachment styles as people pleasers, which is how it's led into people pleasing and codependency. This one's important. So if you are not sure what a secure attachment looks like, this is the early part of the podcast where we are taking notes now. Secure attachment. People with secure attachment style generally had a consistent, nurturing environment. Now, if you look back to your childhood, it may have felt consistent and nurturing. But let me talk to you about what that might have looked like. You grew up feeling safe and valued. That might sound like your feelings were validated. You didn't hear things like, "You're fine," or "You're too sensitive." And the tone of voice was also comforting and safe. That's what that secure attachment looks like. As an adult, if you have secure attachment, it looks like being comfortable in relationships without the constant fear of rejection or abandonment. If somebody's going to peace out, you're like, "I'm going to move on. We'll be okay. I'll be sad for a little while, but it's fine." Now, if you're not in the secure attachment style now, or you never have been, that doesn't mean you can't move into that attachment style. So I just want you to hang on to that. So if you're not in secure attachment, you're like, well, what's coming next? Anxious attachment. If you grew up feeling uncertain about whether you were loved or valued, you might have developed an anxious attachment style. So here's what this looks like as an adult. You need a lot of reassurance. You're overanalyzing text messages. Ooh, does that, when they said sure, do they mean sure or do they mean sure? Oh, they didn't put an emoji with it. I can't imagine what they mean. They don't like me anymore. Are we still friends? Okay, you're probably anxious attachment. Or maybe you even feel worried that your partner might leave you at any moment. How could they possibly love me? If I do something wrong, peace out. A third type of attachment style is called avoidant attachment. Now, if you grew up with an emotionally unavailable caregiver, you might have developed an avoidant attachment style. So as adults, people with avoidant attachment style can be very independent, sometimes to a fault. Sometimes to the point of avoiding close connections because it feels safer not to rely on anybody. And if you think back, if your parent was emotionally unavailable due to a number of reasons, maybe they were sick, they were in the hospital, or they were dealing with their own emotionally abusive or distraught relationship, they couldn't be emotionally available to you, then you are like, I don't know how to handle close relationships because all I remember is somebody being distant from me. That is that avoidant attachment piece. Now, disorganized attachment, this is often the result of childhood trauma or chaotic relationships with caregivers. Now, a lot of us might be at a point where we're like, oh, we've all had childhood trauma. And it's likely true. There's different levels of trauma. So do not discount that if you feel like you're one of the other attachment styles, just because I made that statement about trauma, that this one must obviously be you. It doesn't necessarily mean that. Let's think about what it looks like as an adult. So as an adult, people with this attachment style crave intimacy, but also fear it. So it leads to a push-pull in your relationship. So hence this disorganized label. So you're like, ooh, I want a close relationship, and then you're pushing it away. Sometimes in those kinds of relationships, you're testing constantly. Like, how close is this person going to be with me while you are trying to bring them closer? The truth is, if you grew up constantly worried about losing love, you are more likely to carry that into adulthood. This can show up as people-pleasing, fearing rejection, or staying in an unhealthy relationship just to avoid feeling abandoned. All right, so now that we know where these fears come from and how they play out, let's talk about how to start working through them. As I mentioned, that secure attachment is not out of reach. It's possible to break free from these patterns. And today, I have 4 steps to help you do just that. Now, if you haven't been taking notes on attachment style, or you put the pencil and paper down, or whatever you're taking notes on, bring it back out. It's actionable step time. Number 1, identify the root of your fear. Okay, this isn't just about awareness. This time we're going to be answering some questions. We want to understand where these fears come from. Take some time to think back. Was there a parent who was emotionally unavailable? And you may not have that answer. Some of these attachment styles in the theory are believed to have been created at a very early age. It could have happened in the first 2 years of your life, so you may not have the memory of it. But if you do have the memory where something has happened, a little bit older, maybe 7, 8 years old, think about it. Write it down. Sometimes if we don't have the memory right away and we start journaling, it comes out. Did you feel like you had to earn love or approval? And if it wasn't directly from a parent, maybe your caregiver was a grandparent or another family member, and that speaks a lot. Maybe you were missing your parent, they worked a lot, or your grandparent or another family member who was caring for you was not emotionally available. Journal about it. Tell a trusted friend, or even reach out to a therapist. EMDR is a great practice for unlocking those memories. Understanding the root of your fear is your first step towards letting it go. Number 2, challenge the fear of rejection. Now, this is a big one, and it feels scary. We've all faced rejection in life, and it doesn't define us. It doesn't mean we're unworthy. When you're struggling with this fear, try reframing it. Remind yourself that someone's rejection says more about them than you. Now, if you've ever read The Fifth Agreement, there's a great section about not taking things personally. And I'm going back to Don Miguel Ruiz because he's amazing, and I think the 5th one is by his son. Regardless, The analogy here, we've already talked about a magical kitchen analogy. And the analogy for this one is where if you're walking into a movie theater, you can see that there's a movie playing and it's a scene and it's your mom and it's your spouse and your child. Just pretend you have a child if you don't for this example here. And yourself. And you're seeing this scene play out. Maybe it's a family dinner, just as you remember it. And you look and it's you. You're in the theater. There's one person watching it. It's you. So you leave. So you go into the other theater and it's the same exact scene, except you're coming across as pretty rude. You're trying to figure out why you seem so rude in this one and your mom seems so nice. That's not how you remember this whole thing playing out until you notice that the person watching this version of the movie is your mom. You go to the next theater. If you see where I'm going here, the next one shows a whole different perspective. And this time it's from your spouse's perspective. And it's the same scene, but everyone kind of has a different role and is coming across differently. Because the way people react to things is not the way that you are, it's the way that they are. It's the way that people perceive it. As I mentioned before, the rejection that someone might give to you is more about them than you. So that's the don't take things personally angle. Okay, if somebody says no, if somebody walks away from you, if somebody gets angry, doesn't want you to be part of something, it may have something to do with a terrible day that they had and have nothing to do with you. It was like the timing of the event, the timing of your question. Or you remind them of somebody in their life that hurt them, even though you may be an amazing person. So here's a mantra that I like. And when we talk about mantras, I know they don't feel great in the beginning, especially if you don't believe them. But I promise you, if you practice mantras over and over again, looking in the mirror, your body will eventually believe, your body and your mind will eventually believe what you are saying, but you have to keep doing it. So here's the mantra, write it down. If I lost you, pick up the pencil again. I am worthy, even if someone doesn't approve of me. I am worthy or I am enough, even if someone doesn't approve of me. It can be really powerful. Number 3, practice saying no without fear. I know we've been talking about this for a while. Start by setting small boundaries in low-stake situations. Say no to things that just don't feel right to you. Over time, you're going to see that people still value you, even if you're not constantly saying yes. In fact, they might value you even more because they are respecting your boundaries and probably admire you for them while you're still being your awesome self. Number 4, build secure relationships. Find those people who value you for who you are, not for what you do for them. Now, if you're one of those attachment styles where you have learned that love is conditional, you have probably found a relationship where doing something for the other person makes you feel good in the relationship. You are valuable for who you are, not what you do. Seek out friends and partners who respect your boundaries, who make you feel safe. When you start surrounding yourself with the people who truly care for you, it builds resilience against the fear of being disliked. And lastly, break the cycle for the next generation. If you're a parent, or even if you're not, you are just setting an example for people around you. Younger people will see this, and people who are parents maybe will see you doing this and set the example for their own children. But you can set a different example for the future generation. Show them what secure, unconditional love looks like. If you're the parent, please create a home where love isn't earned by being good or pleasing everyone. I know sometimes it's hard when you feel your own child being upset and you just want to tell them everything is okay. But that is invalidating them because it's not okay for them in their world. So let them know, you know what? I see that you're upset. And be honest. Yep, crying sometimes is frustrating to be around. But I want you to know I love you anyway. I'm going to love you no matter what. And you can cry, and you could be annoying, or you could yell, and you could be frustrating. And sometimes I might even want to walk away because I don't want to get angry. But I still love you, and I'm always going to love you. And I just want you to be you. By telling them this, you are treating your inner child the way you needed to be treated by treating your own child the way you needed to be treated. You are breaking that cycle. You are modeling healthy relationships. You are helping them grow up without that fear of being abandoned or disliked. And just because you might not have had it doesn't mean that your own children need to grow up the same way that you did. You want better for them, for the next generations to come. Thank you so much for joining me today on Normal But Not. Remember, these fears might feel normal because they're so common, but they don't have to be a permanent part of your life. Confronting them and working through them can lead to relationships that are healthier, more fulfilling, and free from the constant need to please. If today's episode resonated with you, I encourage you to start with just one of these steps. Remember, change is a journey, not a sprint. If you're still wondering if you're normal or not, you can head over to krystalcentinello.com/normal quiz to find out a little bit more. And if you found value in today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, share it with someone who might benefit. And join me next week as we dive into another normal belief that might not be serving us. Until then, take care of yourself. And remember, you are worthy of love and respect, just as you are.